Well, Alastair, how did you assess last week's performance? There was a fair bit of blowback from it externally.
Yeah, we were disappointed with our third quarter in particular. You know, the game was pretty much in the balance in the first half, and what we've prided ourselves on as a side since probably the middle of last year has been able to be in contest until three-quarter time or deeper. And sometimes we've gone on and win games, and sometimes we still haven't been able to win, but we've still been able to compete. But last week, you know, we lost the game in contest, and then in general play. And if you lose both those parts of the game, you're in a bit of trouble. And we're opened up in the third quarter big time. So we're trying to address those. The thing about our side is we're still developing our system of how we want to play, and sometimes when we're not to the level that we require, that we can get opened up like we did in that third quarter. But by and large, for the bulk of the season, we've been pretty good in that space and just let ourselves down really badly in that third quarter, which meant that, you know, by three-quarter time, it's very, very hard to try to retrieve that gap.
What about George Wardlaw? We saw him out the track. Is he going to make the cut for the AFL side this week?
Well, it's enormously tempting because he played really well in his return game last week in the reserves, and but we just think he needs another game of game conditioning, and he'll you know, our VFL team's got the bye this week, but they're going to play a bit of an internal scratch match, which he'll get some more game conditioning. We can just control and monitor that a little bit better. You know, he's such an important player for us. We just want to make sure that he's not just ready to play, but he's ready to perform, and we think with at least another week, then it'll give him the best chance to be able to do that.
And Zane Dursma?
Yeah, he's right in the mix. You know, he's had a pretty interrupted summer, but his last 6 to 8 weeks has been really strong, so he'll be in the mix. We'll confirm our side in the next couple of hours, but yeah, he played pretty well last week. We just got a couple of you probably saw, you know, LDU, who's he just got a knock in the game last week that we're pretty confident he'll get to the line, but we just need to balance all those things up by Saturday when we play.
The only other one was Tristan Cherry at the end. He was sort of with some staff looking at the hammy, stretching at the hammy, the right hammy that was a concern for him a couple of weeks ago. Is he all good?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't heard anything from the docs, and usually they'd tell me by now if there's some sort of hiccup with that. So yeah, he'll be fine to play.
Yeah. Back on the performance aspect, is it more frustrating for you after you have a couple of good weeks in a row, at least externally, and then you have sort of a poor week? Is that something that you're encountering now, given you are seeing the good performances a little bit more?
Oh, that's just the ups and downs of footy. You know, we've played two sides, and I think to the wider footy world, they'd look at you know, Western Bulldogs when we played them round one, and oh geez, they got a few of their guys, good guys out. Bontempelli didn't play, and Treloar and a couple of these guys. And then you play Sydney last week, and they got a couple of their guys out that are really, really important players for them. And it's just like, oh well, yeah, North should win this game now. It's what people need to understand, including us, is that it's about their system, and it's just like. The terminology we use at Hawthorn and we also use here is lose a soldier, replace him with another one. And as long as they come in and play their role, yeah, in some instances they won't be able to do it as well as Bontempelli, but as long as they do the mechanics of that role pretty well, then the Western Bulldogs will still be okay. And they've proven that over the last few weeks. And Sydney the same last week. You know, so what we need to do is actually develop our brand and our system and evolve it to a point where it is really resilient and can cope with some of your star players not playing them from one week to the next, and just as yet we're not fully there yet, but that's going to happen with young players, the ups and downs, and yeah, we're really disappointed that we lost both in contest and general play turnover in that third quarter last week. That there's not a side in the competition that's going to win on the scoreboard when those two facets of the game aren't working for you. So we need to address that, and by and large we've been pretty good in that space. But we're poor in that space in that third quarter.
David King was really strong on TV earlier this week. He said that your press conference, he thought you were being dishonest with North Melbourne fans, and that because Sydney had so many out at that grand final side that played last year, that it wasn't a true reflection of how the game actually was. How would you respond to that?
I haven't heard what King had to say. We'd need to understand the context of it, but you know, there's a lot of views out there. We know what we're doing internally. We know what let us down in the third quarter. I indicated that at half time of the game in terms of the corridor, and Sydney were owning that, and we needed to try to get that back, and we couldn't get it back in the third quarter. They're just too good for us. So, and when that's combined with losing contests, you haven't got much chance of being competitive. So we've got to address those things, and over time, I'm sure we're going to get better in that space.
I guess in a perverse way, is that a good thing that you're having to deal with these kind of conversations now where people actually expect you to perform a little bit better than perhaps 12 months ago, but now you are experiencing that external
Yeah, well, I
pressure?
think and those expectations from within as well and for our playing group, and by and large, up until that third quarter, we'd been pretty good in that space for the games that we played, and it's no guarantee that we're going to win them because we'd won one and lost two, but we're in all of those games and being really, really competitive. But we were really disappointing third quarter, and the heat comes. That's okay. We know where we're at. We just got to roll up the sleeves and get back to work. And it's about embedding our system into our younger players and our new players to the club, and hopefully getting better over time.
Brad Scott said some really powerful stuff yesterday about the coaching group. Coaches have never felt more disenfranchised in his time in the game, is what he said, and that he fears a lot of players won't want to take up coaching post-footy. How do you assess the state of the coaching landscape and how it relates to AFL House?
Yeah, I think there's been enough said by many in the game. I think the drums would be beaten pretty loudly at AFL House when both the Scott brothers and Fags and others have made plenty of comment. I think that's supported by all the coaches in the comp. It's a tough environment of all the changes that have been made in the game through COVID and soft cap cuts and all sorts of things. The one that perhaps hasn't come back to the level that it should have compared to every other department in the industry is probably that of the coaches and the football departments. But I'm sure that they're well aware of that at AFL House, and the appropriate discussions will be had at some point in time.
Is the relationship good between the clubs and the AFL at the moment? Because there seems to be some shuffling going on there and some more roles to boost the interaction with clubs. Do you feel supported?
Listen, we really worry about what we can do within the four walls of this footy club, and haven't had any issues in terms of head office or. But as a general rule, the football departments are the ones that help produce the product and give the best product you possibly can. And if you cut corners in that space, then eventually it's going to bite you. And we'd hope at some point in time that's get corrected a bit more.
What do you make of the Suns?
Well, they're a very good side. They haven't been beaten to this point in time in the season, and although Adelaide gave it a really good crack last week, they were really impressive. The Crows, we played them the week before, and we're really impressed with those guys as a side. They run hard, and so do the Gold Coast side. So we're going to need to run well, and they just seem to be playing with a great level of confidence in there. Once again, they've been under Dimmer for 12 months, and they're starting to look like their system's up and going in terms of the way Dimmer wants them to play. So their group has been together a lot longer than our group when you think of some of their guys, especially through their midfield. So that's what we're trying to chase down.
I know this isn't related to North Melbourne, but there's been a lot of discussion about Noah Bolter and whether he should play this week or not. I think even the Victorian Premier weighed in today. Do you feel comfortable? Do you have a stance on whether a player, what is and isn't the line for whether a player should be available for selection?
I'd certainly have a stance if I was at Richmond, and I had to deal with the ins and outs of it. I don't know all that's gone on there, and the Richmond Footy Club and the AFL would be the best ones to speak to. And whilst it's in their court, then I think it's inappropriate that any other club comments on it.
Do you think that the AFL, though, as the overarching body, should be the one to make the call rather than the clubs?
Well, speak to the AFL, not to the North Melbourne Footy Club. They're difficult circumstances, and there's reasons that they make their decisions, and it's best that you deal with those guys rather than us.
It's a completely different situation, I know, but you dealt with sort of a similar kind of problem with Luke Hodge and his drink driving for finals one year. How do you work through situations like that internally as a club? And can you shed any light on what those conversations look like?
Yeah, well, it's a long time ago, but you deal with every one of these cases on their merits, and there's always different circumstances which you need to give consideration to, and you work through that as best you can. And sometimes they're popular decisions that you make, and sometimes they're unpopular, but it's just a call that you need to make at the time. That's why it's no point anyone else trying to work out what's going on at Richmond, because what's going on in the Bolter family and the Richmond Footy Club and at the AFL is for them to determine, not for other clubs to be making judgment on. you know, there'll be plenty of hysteria around what should happen, but they're in the best position to make a call, as indeed the Victorian Police, and you know, it's a matter for the courts as well.
You have no vision or history to look at. How do you prepare for a new ground that hasn't been played on before?
Yeah, we'll get to train on it tomorrow, but I went and had a look at the ground over the summer in this preparation, and listen, we played at Bunbury, you know, 6 weeks ago, and you know, we played Adelaide Hills last year, so as long as it's got green grass for goalposts at either end, then we get ourselves ready to play.
You a fan of the Barossa?
Yeah.
Got a favourite winery in that region?
No, I'm not really a wine buff. I'm mad enough without it, so yeah, no, I won't be thrashing too many wineries over the next couple of days.